Okay, we're on the next step of prayer, which is God's favorite mitzvah, which is what we established. If you haven't, maybe you want to listen to the ones that came before this. But remember, we're using the acronym for the 4 steps of prayer of RPAT. If you remember RPAT and you do this once a day, you fulfilled the mitzvah of prayer. Anytime, anywhere, any language. So R we did, which was recognize, to recognize there's a God. P is praise. And now we're on A of RPAT. A is ask. Ask. If you didn't ask, you didn't pray. It's so funny how so many Jews tell me, "Oh, no, it's not Jewish to ask. We shouldn't ask God for things." As if I have like a prayer quota and I'm going to use it up. Okay, there's no prayer quota. And Jews who are not afraid to ask for anything in a deli, to put it on the side, it's too hot, it's too cold, make it spicy. Like, we're not afraid to do that to the non-Jewish waiter. And yet with God, we don't ask. God wants us to ask. God creates a world where there's needs. There's actually a bracha that we say in the morning where we thank God for creating our needs. It's like thanking God for not giving us everything. Can you imagine your kids coming to you? Thank you so much for not giving me everything. That's not going to happen. But we thank God every day for our lacking. Why? Because when we have a need, we call out. We call out. And God knows we need this most precious relationship. But is there anything too big to ask for? And is there anything too small? Is there anything too big? He's got problems in the Middle East. Like, are we bothering God? Are we are we overreaching? Maybe we should keep it to a minimum. Okay, just ask for like the basic stuff. Or wait till like there's a real crisis, like somebody's being wheeled into an operating room, God forbid. And then we'll ask. Now, is there anything too big? So years ago, we had moved our kids from Canada to the United States. And we uprooted them from their life, from their family, their friends, and everything, and we moved them to the States. So our oldest daughter, she's a sharp cookie, she figured out like, oh, my parents moved me, traumatized me, I can cash in on this. So when she brought home her report card, and she's a good student, and she got straight A's, and she said, and I said, oh, great report card. And she says, yeah, what do I get? Because, when they got a good report card, when we lived in Canada, we gave them a little, like something extra, a gift, like, or something special to say, like, way to go, and to reinforce it. And so she says, what do I get? So I said, well, what do you want? She goes, well, what do you want to give me? I go, well, what do you want? She goes, what do you want to give me? Because I taught her, when you go for a babysitting job, never, and they ask you, how much do you charge? You never say the first number. Because if you say, like, oh, I charge $5 an hour, and they're used to paying $7 an hour, you're hired. And even when you go for a job today as an adult, like if you never say the first number. They say, well, what kind of salary are you looking for? So you don't say like, oh, I'm thinking like, $65,000 a year. And they were willing to pay $95,000 a year. You're hired. So what do you say? Well, if you're the babysitter, like you say, well, what do you usually pay your usual babysitter? What do you pay? You get them to say the first number. And then you negotiate from there. But you never say the first number. Little trick. So now let's go back to our story. So now she's saying, I'm saying, what do you want? And she says, what do you want to give me? So she knows that I know, because I taught her this, that I'm not giving in. So she's got to come up with her ask. Okay. Now, if she asks for a car, it's too big. That's too big. If she asks for a ballpoint pen, that's too small. Somewhere between a pen and a car is my price, and she's trying to figure out what that is. What does she base her number on? Her ask. What does she base it on? There's really two main criteria. Somebody said, oh, she bases it on what she needs. No. This has nothing to do with what she needs. It's what she wants. Okay, so what are the two criteria? Number one, what did I give her in the past? What did I give her in the past? So in the past, she got whatever it was, and she knows that, oh, now it's 1 year later, I'm older, and my parents traumatized me, and they feel guilty, and so I can up the ask, okay? So one is based on the past. What have I already given her? And the other criteria is, what am I capable of giving? Her father's a rabbi. It's not like my husband's going to score big bris and we're cashing out. We kind of like wax and wane financially, okay? So number one, what have I given her in the past? And number two, what am I capable of giving? Let's switch this to the Almighty. When we go before God and we ask, is there anything too big? Number one, what has God given you in the past? Everything. He gave you life. Everything pales in comparison. You can't over ask. He's already given you the greatest thing possible. And number two, what is God capable of giving? Anything. Anything. God can do anything. So there's nothing too big. Is there anything too small? There's a lot of problems in the world. You got some tsunamis, earthquakes, and starvation, always problems in the Middle East, wars, Russia invaded Ukraine. There's global warming. There's a lot of issues in the world. And so I'm going to ask God for a parking spot? Really? Yes. Really. Imagine we decide to have a family meeting, okay? My husband and I are super busy people, okay? And we call a family meeting and we say to the kids, okay, guys, okay, you see Ima and Abba are busy, like what we're doing. So come to us on your birthdays, come to us on your graduations, come to us when you get engaged, come to us for the wedding, come to us when your first baby is born, for the big things. But in between, don't bother us. What kind of relationship would we have with our kids? Pretty bad. Pretty bad. Our relationships are not based on the big things. They're based on the small, tiny things. The sweetest, simplest things. My relationship with my husband is not based on what we do on our wedding anniversary every year. It's how we treat each other every day. I think Einstein said, God is in the details. It's the little things. My husband, he's a rabbi. He marries people, he buries people. And he told me the most amazing story. Because he said he's always blown away at when he has to do a funeral the night before. And he talks to the family and they talk about their loved one who passed away, usually somebody older in the family. He said kids, adult children, never talk about the big grand things they did growing up, like the trip to Europe, or they tell the sweetest, simplest stories. He told me that he had a friend and whose father passed away, and my husband went to the funeral. And the friend grew up in New York. He grew up Orthodox, religious in New York. And in front of his father's casket, he told the following story. He said, my father, my brother and I really liked the Yankees, like baseball. So my father would sometimes take us to a Yankees game. He said one Sunday he took us to a game, and it went into extra innings. And the game went much longer than it was supposed to. And they won. It was so exciting. And like tens of thousands of people get up in the stadium. And my father looked at his watch, and he looked into the sky, and he said, "Boys, we're not going to get home in time to daven mincha, in time to pray the afternoon service." Because traditionally, a Jewish man prays 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. So he said, it's getting late. We're going to have to daven mincha, pray the afternoon service at Yankee Stadium. And he said, my brother and I were like, "Dad, it's Yankee Stadium." He goes, no, come. They found a corridor, figured out which way was east, and they took a few minutes to pray. He said, in front of his father's coffin, "That day, my father taught me there's a time for baseball, popcorn, and peanuts. And there's a time for God." Do you think that man, his father, in a million years would have thought that that's the story his son would tell on the day of his funeral? My husband always asks people, what stories do you want your children to tell at your funeral? Now let's live our life accordingly and be the example to our kids. So there's nothing too big and nothing too small. But our Rabbi Noach Weinberg, Zatzal, blessed memory, taught us that the essence of prayer is, what do you want and why do you want it? What do you want and why do you want it? Now we always have the what do I want, but we rarely go to why do we want it. And the first why is almost never the why. I'll give you an example. So as I told you, my husband is like, it's not like he's going to score a big percent. So we wax and wane financially. So we used some kind of sink and swim. So we were going through a sink. Sink. And I was in Israel, and I was researching a new book, and I was meeting with Rabbi Noach Weinberg. And I mentioned to him that it was doing research about prayer. And I mentioned to him that I've been davening for parnasa. I've been praying for money, but it's not forthcoming. So, and I'm a little bit like at a loss. And so Reb Noach asked me, he goes, "What do you want?" I said, "Money." And he asked me, "Why do you want it?" Why do I want it? I thought, poor Rabbi Weinberg, he's so sheltered here in Israel. To pay my bills, Rabbi Weinberg. He asked why. I go, why? So they don't shut off my phone or turn off my heat. And then he kept asking why. Why on this and why on that? And he kept asking me why, until I finally said, okay, I want money so we can pay our bills, so that my husband, who is so great, does not have to be weighed down by debt and can really make a difference for the Jewish people. He goes, now pray. And when money was forthcoming, instead of paying our bills and saying, okay, let's take a trip to Disney World, I said, Yaakov, go teach. Go develop that seminar for the Jewish people. The Hebrew word for prayer is lehitpalel, which means to self-examine, to self-judge. Through the process of prayer, God can only give it to us if it's good for us. Through the process of prayer, we help to make it good for us. Because God answers every prayer. Sometimes he says yes, and sometimes he says no. So if he says no, we have to ask ourselves, if it was good for me, then he would give it to me. So why isn't it good for me? Do I have to change? Am I asking for the wrong thing? Would I not use it properly? So there's nothing too big, and there's nothing too small. And what do you want, and why do you want it? I remember a girl came up to me after my dating workshop. She goes, do you know any guys for me? I go, what do you want? She goes, I want to get married. I asked her why. She's like, why? Because I don't want to be alone. I go, get a puppy. They're cheaper. Why don't you want to be alone? So the first why is almost never the answer. You just keep asking why on the why on the why on the why on the answer, and they keep asking why until finally you got it. Because if you don't know why you want it, you wouldn't use it properly. It wouldn't be good for you, or you would pass it by. You wouldn't even recognize it when God answered. So there's nothing too big, and there's nothing too small. God can do anything. And much better to build your relationship with God through the small things. Just keep asking for things. And when God answers your prayers, and everybody has had prayers answered, realize, wow, that's awesome. Here I am on this planet. God answered my prayer. Now what do you want? Go bigger. Go big. Anything. Anything is possible. But make sure you know why.